Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be talking about U.S. immigration.
Okay.
It's a topic that's been in the headlines, well, forever, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely for centuries.
It's kind of crazy to think about. The U.S. actually has the largest immigrant population in the whole world.
Wow.
Back in 2013, get this, there were already 36 million immigrants living in the U.S.
It's a huge number.
So for this deep dive, we're going to be looking at some lecture notes from a course called SW 475 Practice with Refugees and Immigrants.
Okay.
It's taught by Dr. Michael J. Alicea,
Oh, interesting.
and we'll be using his 2025 spring lecture notes.
Cool.
We're going to go beyond just the headlines and try to understand the history and the current trends in immigration.
Yeah,
And what's really interesting is how social workers approach this whole issue.
that's a great angle.
And get this, we're actually going to hear a personal story, too.
Oh, wow.
So the lecture notes start by talking about this thing called the push-pull theory of immigration. I was thinking about this, and I realized that if social workers understand those push and pull factors, they could be even more effective in helping immigrants, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like someone fleeing a war, their needs are going to be totally different from someone who, just wants a better job.
Right, exactly. It's not like one solution that works for everyone.
Definitely not.
Dr. Alicea also talks about transnationalism.
Oh, right.
Basically, how today's immigrants, they don't just, cut all ties with their home countries.
They're living in two worlds almost.
Yeah, and think about that from a social worker's perspective. You're working with someone who's maybe sending money back home,
Yeah.
or they're still, super involved with their community in another country.
Right. It changes everything.
It really adds another layer to the whole thing.
For sure.
And then there's chain migration, which Dr. Alicea also mentions.
Okay.
The idea that immigrants often follow the social networks that are already established.
Yeah, I've seen that.
It's kind of like how, Little Italy or Chinatown formed.
Yeah, exactly.
So chain migration, it can create a sense of community,
Mm-hmm.
but it also, raises questions about how those networks might influence integration.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like, do those networks help or hinder access to resources, that sort of thing?
Right. Definitely something for social workers to think about.
It's kind of like realizing that everyone's individual story is part of a much bigger picture.
I like that.
So let's talk about the U.S. specifically.
Okay.
The numbers are insane. Over 12% of the entire U.S. population is foreign-born.
That's a lot of people.
And that's part of what makes America so diverse, right?
Absolutely. It's incredible. But for social workers, it means they're encountering people with a huge range of experiences and needs.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Navigating the legal system, language barriers, cultural differences.
So many things to consider.
It really highlights just how important cultural competence is in social work.
Definitely. And it's not always easy.
Dr. Ozzie also points out that the U.S. has a pretty complicated history with immigration.
It's true.
It's like this back and forth, welcoming immigrants and then restricting immigration over and over.
A real pendulum swing, yeah.
Exactly.
And understanding that context is crucial for social workers.
Oh, totally.
Because those policies have a direct impact on the people they're trying to help.
So let's talk about some of those key moments in history.
Sure.
Dr. Alicea mentions the Immigration Act of 1882.
Okay.
That's when things started to change, right?
Yeah, that was the beginning of real restrictions on immigration.
Like what kind of restrictions?
Well, they barred certain groups from entering the country.
Like who?
Convicts, for example.
Oh, okay.
And anyone they considered likely to become a public charge.
Oh, interesting.
It was a big shift from the early days of basically open immigration.
So what happened next?
Well, then came the Immigration Act of 1924.
Okay.
This one was really significant because it introduced national origin quotas.
What does that mean?
They basically put limits on how many immigrants could come from certain countries.
Wow.
So immigration from Southern and Eastern Europe, Asia, and Africa was drastically limited.
That's pretty intense.
It's a really clear example of how policy can be used to change demographics and social structures.
And those quotas, they had a lasting impact, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It wasn't until the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 that things really changed again.
Right.
Dr. Alicea points that out.
Yeah, that act abolished the national origin quotas.
Oh, wow.
They shifted the focus to family reunification
Okay.
and attracting skilled workers.
So that opened the doors for more immigrants from where?
From Latin America, Asia, and Africa.
So how does all this history connect to social work today?
Well, think about it this way. Knowing how those policies have impacted different communities, it helps social workers understand the challenges immigrants are facing right now.
Yeah, I see that.
And then they can advocate for better solutions.
So we've talked about all this history, and we know the numbers are huge.
Right.
But what about the people behind the numbers?
That's what's important.
Dr. Alicea included a personal interview with a man named Abdisalam Adam in his course materials.
Oh, I remember reading that. He had quite a story.
Yeah, it's a great example of how individual experiences can help us understand these big issues.
Totally.
His story, it was actually recorded for the Minnesota Digital Library back in 2023.
Okay.
And it basically talks about his journey from Somalia to the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
So what made him decide to come to the U.S.?
Well, he was looking for better educational opportunities.
Okay.
And, just a better life in general.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that he specifically chose Minnesota because he had heard about its Somali community.
Oh, so chain migration.
Exactly. Shows how important those social networks can be.
So did he run into any problems when he got here?
Oh, absolutely. He talks about the language barrier, the culture shock, the struggle to find affordable housing, and just the emotional toll of being separated from his family.
It's a lot to deal with.
It really is. And those are all things social workers need to be aware of when they're supporting new immigrants.
It reminds me of what we were talking about earlier about culturally sensitive practice.
Exactly.
So how did he handle all that?
He found strength in his faith community.
Okay.
And he also had this, inner resilience.
That's amazing.
He also got help from some local organizations and mentors.
Oh, that's great.
They helped him learn English and adjust to life here.
It makes you realize just how crucial social workers and community organizations are for immigrants.
They really make a difference.
It's about providing those resources and that guidance that can help people adjust to a completely new life.
Yeah, exactly. And remembering that everyone's journey is different with its own set of challenges and successes.
So true.
It's great that Adam had that support system.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that not every immigrant has the same experience.
Right.
Some face even bigger challenges.
Yeah.
Well, mental health is a big one.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
It's a huge issue.
I mean, think about it. Leaving everything behind, adapting to a new culture.
Right. Learning a new language, maybe struggling financially.
It's a lot.
It really is. Dr. Alicea actually talks about this in his notes.
What does he say?
He says immigrants are at a higher risk for things like anxiety and depression.
Oh, wow.
And even PTSD.
That's not surprising when you think about it.
No, not at all.
And for some immigrants, there's the added trauma of what they went through before coming here.
Yeah, definitely. War, persecution, dangerous journeys.
It's heady stuff. As social workers, we have to be able to recognize that trauma.
Absolutely. Trauma-informed care is so important when we're working with immigrant populations.
So what does that look like?
It's about understanding how past experiences can affect people in the present.
Okay.
And providing support that's sensitive to their culture.
So taking into account their background, their beliefs about mental health.
Right, and any language barriers.
It's about meeting them where they are.
Exactly. And advocating for policies that make mental health services accessible to all immigrants.
Regardless of their legal status.
Exactly.
Because there are a lot of barriers right now, aren't there?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Lack of insurance, fear of deportation.
Right.
Even just the stigma surrounding mental health.
It can be tough to overcome those obstacles.
It can, and that's why we have to push for systemic change.
To create a system where anyone can get the mental health support they need.
That's the goal.
So we've talked about individual support and systemic change. But what about integration?
Right.
Dr. Alicea talks a lot about this.
It's a big one.
It seems like there's no easy answer.
Not really, no.
Like, how do you balance maintaining your own culture with adapting to a new one?
It's tricky. There are different schools of thought on this.
Okay, like what?
Well, some people think assimilation is the way to go.
Where immigrants are expected to, fully adopt the dominant culture.
Yeah. Others think a multicultural approach is better.
Where everyone's culture is celebrated and they coexist.
Exactly.
But as social workers, we know there's no single solution.
Right. No, not at all. Everyone's experience is different.
So our job is to support each individual on their journey, to help them navigate those cultural differences, advocate for their rights.
And create a more inclusive environment for everyone.
Okay, so speaking of creating a welcoming environment,
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious about the economic impact of immigration.
That's a good one.
It seems like that's always a hot topic,
Oh, absolutely. It's very political.
with arguments on both sides.
Yeah, you've got people saying that immigrants take jobs away from native-born workers.
Right, and strain public resources.
But But then you've got all this evidence that immigrants actually contribute a lot to the economy.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, they fill labor gaps, they start businesses, and they often boost innovation.
So it's more complex than just those simple arguments.
It is. We have to be careful about generalization.
Yeah, for sure.
The reality is much more nuanced.
So it's important to look at the data.
Absolutely. And we have to avoid those stereotypes.
The ones that dehumanize immigrants.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of thinking just fuels prejudice.
So we've talked about the economic side, the cultural side.
Mm-hmm.
We can't forget about the legal and political stuff.
Oh, that's a whole other can of worms.
Dr. Alicea talks about all the different immigration categories.
Right.
It's a lot to keep track of.
It is. You've got family-based visas, employment-based visas, humanitarian programs for refugees and asylum seekers.
It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it can be super confusing for people who aren't familiar with it.
Especially if they don't have a lawyer or if there's a language barrier.
Exactly. That's where social workers come in.
As advocates?
Mm-hmm. We can help immigrants understand their rights.
Okay.
Connect them with legal aid organizations, advocate for better policies.
So it's about being a guide, a translator.
Yeah, a voice for those who might not be able to speak up for themselves.
And then there's the political context.
Oh, yes.
Which feels really charged right now.
It is. Immigration is such a hot-button issue.
With strong opinions on both sides.
Definitely. Some people want stricter border control and enforcement of immigration laws.
Right.
Others want more compassionate policies, like a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants.
As social workers, it's important to understand all those viewpoints, right?
It is, even if we don't agree with them.
But we need to be able to have those conversations respectfully.
Absolutely. To listen to each other and advocate for policies that are just and humane.
And part of that is being aware of how the media portrays immigration.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Because those stories can really influence public opinion and policy decisions.
They can. Unfortunately, a lot of media coverage is pretty sensationalized.
What do you mean?
Well, they focus on crime or they portray immigrants as a burden on society.
That doesn't help.
No, it doesn't. It just fuels prejudice and fear.
It's like it makes it harder for immigrants to feel welcome.
Exactly. It creates this climate of suspicion, which makes everything more difficult for them.
There's like an extra layer of stress on top of everything else.
It is. So we have to be critical consumers of media.
Not just believe everything we hear.
Right. Look for balanced information, challenge stereotypes.
And listen to the voices of immigrants themselves.
Exactly. Let them tell their own stories.
Okay, so speaking of stories.
Yeah.
Let's talk about immigrant children and families.
That's such an important topic.
They're often dealing with so much.
They are. Acculturation, language barriers, poverty, trauma.
It's a lot for anyone, let alone kids.
It really is. Social workers need to be prepared to address all those needs.
So what are some of the things we should be aware of?
Well, acculturation is a big one.
It's adjusting to a new culture.
Right. Imagine being a kid suddenly thrown into a whole new world.
Yeah, that'd be tough.
You're trying to learn a new language, maybe feeling caught between your parents' expectations and your peers' expectations.
It's a lot to handle.
It is. And for parents, there's the added stress of trying to maintain their own culture while also helping their kids integrate.
It can lead to conflict, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Social workers need to be able to help families navigate those cultural differences.
To communicate better.
Exactly.
And then there are the practical challenges, too.
Right, like finding housing, getting health care, figuring out the school system.
That can be so overwhelming.
It can, especially with language barriers, lack of transportation, and maybe even fear of deportation.
So many obstacles.
It's our job to help families overcome those obstacles.
To connect them with resources, advocate for better policies.
Exactly, and to be sensitive to their experiences.
Because a lot of immigrant children have experienced trauma, haven't they?
They have. Witnessing violence, fleeing war, dangerous journeys.
That trauma doesn't just disappear.
No, it stays with them. And it can affect everything. Their ability to learn, to form relationships.
It can make it hard to adjust.
It can. We need to advocate for policies that address those needs.
It's like mental health services, educational support, legal protection.
Exactly. We need a system that helps them heal and reach their full potential.
But let's not forget about the social workers themselves.
Oh, that's important.
This work is hard.
It is, yeah.
Emotionally and mentally draining.
We're constantly dealing with trauma, with systemic barriers, with people's deepest fears.
It takes a toll.
It does. So self-care is crucial.
We have to take care of ourselves so we can take care of others.
Exactly. It's not selfish, it's essential.
So what can we do?
Be mindful of burnout, compassion fatigue.
Right.
Set boundaries, talk to our colleagues, do things that bring us joy.
It's about replenishing our energy.
Exactly. So we can keep showing up for our clients with empathy and compassion.
Because we need that resilience to deal with these challenges.
We do. And it's important to remember that we're not alone in this.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
We have each other. We have our professional organizations.
Yeah.
And there are so many people out there who are fighting for social justice and immigrant rights.
It's a whole movement.
It is. And we're all part of it.
We've talked about a lot, haven't we?
We have. It's a big topic.
So much to think about.
Yeah, immigration is a really complex issue.
But I think what's interesting is how it all connects back to social work.
Oh, definitely.
Social workers are on the front lines.
Right there in the middle of it all.
Working with real people who are trying to figure all this out.
It's challenging work, but it's so important.
So for someone listening who's maybe thinking about becoming a social worker,
yeah,
what are the key takeaways here?
Well, I think the most important thing is cultural humility.
What does that mean?
It's about understanding that we all see the world through our own cultural lens.
Okay.
And we have to be open to learning from other people's perspectives.
So not just assuming everyone sees things the same way we do.
Exactly. We have to be willing to adapt our approach.
Because everyone's different.
Right. And we also have to be aware of the systemic barriers that immigrants face. Discrimination, poverty, lack of access to healthcare and education.
Right.
A legal system that can be really hard to understand.
It's a lot to navigate.
It is. And it's our job to advocate for change.
So advocacy is a big part of it.
It is. And it doesn't have to be this big dramatic thing.
It can be small things.
It can. Like making sure your intake forms are in multiple languages.
Oh.
Or offering counseling that's sensitive to different cultures.
It's big thoughtful.
Exactly. It's about making people feel welcome and respected.
So what else can a social worker do?
Help families find ESL classes, job training, legal aid.
Okay.
Advocate for better language access in schools and hospitals.
Right.
Organize community events that bring people together.
Lots of possibilities.
There are. It's about meeting people where they are, recognizing their strengths, and helping them find their own voice.
And realizing that we don't have all the answers.
That's so important. We have to be willing to learn.
And the communities we serve.
Yes. To build trust and relationships.
And to approach this work with humility.
Absolutely. We're not here to save anyone. We're here to support them.
To walk alongside them on their journey.
I like that. It's about partnership.
So let's go back to Abdisalan Adam's story.
Okay.
What does his journey teach us about resilience?
Well, he went through so much.
He did.
Language barriers, culture shock, separation from his family, financial struggles.
It's amazing he made it through all that.
It is. But he not only survived, he thrived.
But he became an ESL teacher.
Yeah, he used his experiences to help others.
That's incredible.
It really shows the power of resilience. And I think it also shows the impact social workers can have.
Just by supporting one person, we can make a difference in a whole community.
Exactly. It creates this ripple effect.
So even small actions can have big consequences.
They can. It's all about creating a more just and compassionate world.
Where everyone feels welcome.
Exactly. So to everyone listening out there,
yeah,
remember that every interaction, every effort to build understanding, every step toward justice.
It all matters.
It all matters. Keep learning, keep engaging, keep those conversations going.
And keep fighting for a better world.
That's what it's all about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive
into the world of U.S. immigration.
We'll catch you next time.